Hello YouTubers, I'm Colin and this is part 1 of TamiyaTruckBuilding. If this is the first time you've landed here, please check out my introductory video which explains what this series is all about. In this episode I'll show you my workstation, we'll have a look at the tools I use and I'll give a quick overview of the Tamiya Volvo FH12 kit which I'm going to build. My working area is a small conservatory. There's enough room for 3 desks plus some other bits and pieces. For modelling I use 2 desks, one for spreading things out like a manual or large parts and the other for building. I have a couple of drawer chests with bits and bobs including a drawer for paints. Being a conservatory there's no shortage of light. 3 spotlights in the roof come in handy at night, and when I need to work on a small part this battery desk lamp is really useful. On the 3rd desk is my PC. I use Photoshop to design decals. In most builds I use perhaps 80% of the supplied decals and design print the balance myself. I have a mid-range Canon photo printer. It's nothing fancy, which is more than capable of doing anything I need. Here's a photo of the rear of my tow truck. The chevron decal is homemade. I'll do a session on decals and printing later in this series. My other location is in the garage. I have a homemade spray booth, which is nothing more than a large cardboard box really, but it works well. The garage has 2 doors, which is good for ventilation, but the only downside is when it's cold and or windy. If it's really cold or blowing a gale, painting has to wait for another day. Being retired, I have spare time for my hobby. I can appreciate though that some will just have to grab a bit of time as and when they can. As a guide, if you model for about 2 or 3 hours per day, it'll take you about 2 months to complete a model. Obviously it depends on how big the job is, how much time you have and the speed at which you work. Personally, I really enjoy the build and don't rush at things. I find if I do I only make mistakes. So there you are, my workstation. Now let's have a look at some modelling tools. Don't laugh at my tool rack. I know it's a piece of expanded foam from a washing machine delivery box. I've tried all sorts of fancy trays and boxes and still come back to my trusty foam. It works for me. That's all that matters. What I like is the way I can access or grab whatever tool I need quickly and then return it to its cutout. Have you ever had loads of tools on your workbench and can't for the love of it find a particular tool? Or spent ages rummaging through a box looking for the "I know I had one somewhere"? I'm not OCD people, I just get frustrated wasting time looking for things, so I work tidily, if there's such a word. Tools. You can't build without them. But have you got the right ones for the job? How many people know the screws in these kits require a JIS profile screwdriver? What's one of them, I hear you ask? Well, it's a crosshead screwdriver with a different shaped cross. Tamiya screws are Japanese, sorry for stating the obvious, and as such have JIS, Japanese industry standard, head profiles. Yes, you can get away with a standard crosshead, but you'll find you need to put on more pressure than a JIS to maintain a grip, plus it's quite easy to round off the head. If you only buy one thing, treat yourself to a set of JIS screwdrivers, you'll be glad you did. Then there's a vernier or a caliper and a steel ruler. I would not be without these. There are many different size screws and bolts which look very similar unless you measure the length of them and the diameter. For example, There are a few 2.6mm diameter screws amongst a lot of 3mm diameter screws. Frankly, I can't tell them apart, but the vernier can, and it isn't an expensive purchase. Modelling knife and sharp blade. Amazing how quickly they can go blunt when cutting odd bits of plastic, so I always have spare blades to hand. I have to say the modelling knife is an invaluable tool. Then there's flat-sided small cutters, a boon for removing plastic parts from their sprues cleanly without fuss. Avoid the ones with a beveled edge. Look for the ones that are flat on the bottom rather than beveled. With these you'll get a much cleaner and closer cut when taking the parts off a screw. I have a few different pointed nose pliers for those hard to get to, difficult to hold parts. Then there's tweezers, great for holding things when you find your fingers are too big. A mini drill and various small bits. You do have to make the odd hole, so it's worth investing in a mini drill. Then there's kifs. Yeah, you heard right, kifs. It's a homemade word by me for wire twists, because I couldn't think of a better name for them. I save them all when I can and have a drawer full. They're great for holding a few bits together or grouping cables. They're easy to twist and easy to take off. Likewise are cable ties. I have a big bag full of them and use them regularly. Storage containers, like takeaway tubs, that kind of thing, washed of course, are great for organising your nuts, bolts and other parts. Then there's a cutting mat. Many years old and still going strong, nice to work on and saves cutting up or damaging your desk. Glasses, well yes, doubtless you've noticed I wear glasses. They are for reading only. Being a little long-sighted, I can't see small parts clearly or in focus when close up. Enter my trusty close-up glasses with interchangeable lenses and a LED light. I might look like Joe 90, and you'll have to be my age to understand that one, but this gadget is an absolute necessity for me. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. Cheap off the net. If you're struggling to see, get a set. Highly recommended. Soldering stuff. I have a temperature controlled iron and associated bits to be able to solder up wires, resistors and LEDs. If you plan to use a ready-made kit of electronics such as the Tamiya MFU, you won't need one as the LEDs come pre-wired. I generally fit BEIER electronics, B-E-I-E-R, and prefer to make up my own. If you're not into soldering, you can always buy ready-made examples off the internet. Okay, the Volvo FH12 kit. Let's start on the outside. As is always the case with Tamiya, the boxes are sturdy, high quality and brightly coloured. Measuring 65 by 40 by 18 centimetres, or in English 26 inches by 16 by 7, even this modest truck fills a big box. Images show exploded views of the truck and gearbox and make reference to various TROPs, an acronym standing for Truck Optional Parts. You'll see this crop up throughout the manual. TROPs for this model include motorised support legs, that would be for the trailer, plated chrome gearbox covers instead of the standard black ones, aluminium steering servo mounts and more. Also shown is a picture of the multi-function unit, the MFU03, which is required for sound, light and vibration on European trucks. This is quite an expensive add-on, but does change an inanimate object into a realistic working truck. Let's open up the box. When you first open the box, don't be tempted to start unpacking things. Best to find the manual first and sit and study it. You most likely want to get started, but trust me, reading up on the build process first pays dividends. The diagrams are not difficult, but they are usually fairly complex, and it's easy to miss something or do things in the wrong order. Trust me, I've done it. Instructions are in 3 languages, which adds to the complexity of the information in front of you. My tip, what I do, is I go through the manual with a yellow highlighter and mark up all of the English bits. It takes about half an hour, but it's well worth the job. It's much less confusing. At this stage, if you haven't already thought about it, you really need to decide whether this is going to be a shelf model or a working model. If you plan the former, you only need to buy paint and a bit of plastic cement to complete things. However, if you want a working model, there are a few things you will need from the outset. Firstly, radio control equipment, that is a transmitter and a receiver. You'll need servos for the steering and the gearbox, and possibly one for the 5th wheel if you want to motorise that, that's optional. A truck motor. The stock one revolves much too fast and is unrealistic in my opinion. You can use the supplied motor, but in all honesty I believe it spins too fast for a truck. The Carson Poison motor truck spins a lot slower and is much more controllable and realistic. A battery to power it, and some paint. There's brush and spray required unless you've bought a pre-painted version. So now might be a good time to have a think about what colour you want it to be painted. Lastly, electrics. Assuming you want it to be a working model, of course. You could just fit a basic electronic speed controller, ESC as they're called, or do you fancy a sound and light unit? Some decisions need making now, such as purchasing an ESC, the servos, a battery and radio equipment. Well, that's it for part 1, YouTubers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Look out for part 2 coming soon, where I'll talk a little bit about my electrical options and get started on the build. Any questions, please send me a message, and if you like my video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Bye for now.